On June 17, 1972, the Democratic National Committee was broken into while a group of burglars were attempting to bug it. The police caught the burglars and 5 men were arrested. The scandal, however, did not end there. Over a period of 2 years, more leads continued to be revealed and more men continued to be arrested. Finally, the Watergate scandal culminated in the resignation of President Richard Nixon. The role of journalism throughout the 1970s was changing rapidly, and the way that Watergate was presented to the public had a tremendous effect on how it is remembered today. Since then, people have relied on media as a fourth branch of government to keep the government in check and provide a level of transparency. Media was crucial in the way that Watergate turned out, due to both Carl Bernstein and Robert Woodward's breaking open of the scandal, and then David Frost's interviews, which swayed public opinion away from the presidency and affirmed that Nixon had been involved. Richard Nixon became the 37th President of the United States in 1969. During Nixon's first term as president, he was mostly liked by the public and was fairly successful in many areas, including working to end the war in Vietnam. On November 7, 1972, Nixon was re-elected for a second term by a landslide election with more than 60% of the vote. Prior to this election was the break-in of the Democratic National Committee, but there was no known connection or significance. 2 young reporters for the Washington Post, Carl Bernstein and Robert Woodward, were determined to find the actual motive of the burglary and who had hired the burglars. They were faced with almost everyone stonewalling them throughout their investigation, yet they kept at it as they knew it was something big. If it were not for Carl Bernstein and Robert Woodward's continued dedication to follow the story, the Watergate cover-up may have succeeded. Their investigations are documented in the book, later turned Academy Award-winning film, All the President's Men. The movie begins with a typewriter and punches between every word as if the government is taking a punch with each of Bernstein and Woodward's words. It then goes on to show how the 2 young and mostly unproven reporters had been given the case. For a while, they are wholly unsuccessful in finding anything or anyone to speak to them. Instead of discouraging them, it drove them farther to find the truth. The movie focuses solely on the 2 characters' pursuit of the story and does not develop the characters' lives further than that. This is purposeful because it keeps the focus entirely on their pursuit of the truth. The entire movie is them finding sources and proving that the Watergate burglary extended as far up as the presidency. By coming from Woodward and Bernstein's perspectives, it shifts the focus of the movie from all of the government and Nixon's denial and lies to the ability of the media to expose the truth. It shows how important freedom of the press really is in keeping the government in check and gives the people something to rely on. The scope and power of the government is shown especially when Deep Throat warns Woodward that they may be in danger. The scene where Woodward meets him in secret in a dark, echoing parking garage has become iconic. It gave a dangerous feel to what they were doing and exaggerated the importance of the investigation. Spy movies to this day use that as a classic backdrop for sketchy meetings. Through Deep Throat, they began to follow the money involved in the burglary. A $25,000 check was meant to go to the Committee for the Re-election of the President, ended up in the bank of one of the Watergate burglars. This lead was enough for them to continue their investigation, which led them deeper and deeper into the involvement of senior White House officials. On February 7, 1973, a select Senate committee was created to investigate Watergate, led by Sam Ervin. The next break in the case was the revelation that there was a new system of recording in the White House. The tapes were then subpoenaed, yet Nixon refused to release them, citing his executive privilege. Even without the tapes, Haldeman, Ehrlichman, Mitchell, Charles Colson, Jordan C. Strachan, Robert Mardian, and Kenneth Parkinson, also known as the Watergate 7, were all indicted. Nixon and top officials were also cited as co-conspirators that were not indicted in the case. The case of Nixon claiming executive privilege over the tapes went to the Supreme Court, which ruled unanimously that the privilege was void and ordered him to release them. There was one tape in particular that was a smoking gun and revealed Nixon's knowledge of the cover-up, which was released on August 5, 1974.
It's too early to say, but it would appear that in given a very difficult situation and no cooperation from justice, either FBI or Columbians, that our guys have done and these two lawyers at the committee's heart have done a superb job of keeping this thing
Below this finance.
Let's tie it up.
Let's be realistic about the goddamn thing.
If it blows, it blows.
It blows, and so on.
And we
We
ride
did
it
have
out.
to take action off the ticket, did we? So what is this?
Sorry?
What is this? I'm not that worried about it, to be completely candid with you.
It's worth a lot of work to try and keep it from blowing.
Oh, Christ, yes, because you don't like the idea.
But if it blows, we'll survive it. It isn't something that
After all, Mitchell's gone, and we've all found out that nobody at the higher level was involved, the White House not being involved, and all that stuff. The Cuban crap in there. The Cubans are going to plead not guilty.
On August 8, 1974, Nixon finally resigned rather than being impeached. Woodward and Bernstein uncovered a system of political dirty tricks and crimes that eventually led to indictments of 40 White House and administration officials, and ultimately to the resignation of President Richard Nixon. Bernstein and Woodward's persistence for the truth established media as a check of government power. If Nixon had gotten away with Watergate, it would have continued a dangerous precedent of intense and illegal secrecy within government. Professor of Political Science at Drake University, Dennis Goldford, said, "Watergate led to a romanticism of investigative reporting." Even after his resignation, Nixon never confessed to anything. He left the American public torn and upset about their president. Nixon himself wanted a chance to restore some of his reputation and point out the good aspects of his presidency. When a British television star, David Frost, requested a series of interviews with him, he saw it as a perfect opportunity. This entire ordeal is depicted in the Hollywood film Frost v. Nixon. While there are some inaccuracies, the film is effective in showing the importance of the interviews to the entire country. They purposely pinned Democrats against Nixon's polished, strong party, which contrasts the media and government and also alludes to how divided politics are. Nixon is a very complicated character. He seems emotional, but at the same time very rigid. Frost's character grows tremendously as he puts his career on the line to pursue this endeavor. The director's purpose is to show how incredible it was that Frost, a talk show host, could take down the President of the United States when no one else could. It goes to show that power is not always everything, but the truth is what is important. In one of the first interviews about the Vietnam War, Frost managed to get Nixon to say, "If the president does it, that means it's not illegal." This clearly shows that Nixon truly believed that even if he was involved in Watergate, it shouldn't matter. From April 15th to 17th, 1977, David Frost conducted the Watergate portions of the interviews. In the prior interviews, Nixon had mainly been in control and never seemed uncomfortable. Frost's research proved to be enough, and he was able to surprise Nixon with a never-before-seen recording of a conversation on February 14, 1973, between him and Charlie Colson, a White House aide, which states, "The cover-up is the main ingredient. That's where we gotta cut our losses. My losses are to be cut. The president's losses got to be cut on the cover-up deal." This ultimately turned the tables and put Frost at an advantage. By the end of the interviews, Frost had gotten Nixon to apologize, which is what the entire American public had been waiting to hear. Although Nixon had already been pardoned, the interviews had ended his political career. After Watergate, the public and the news media more carefully scrutinized people who were in the running for positions of power. The secrets of the Nixon administration drove a national movement to make government meetings and records more accessible to the public. 3 acts were passed in the wake of the Watergate scandal to prevent such misuse of government power again. The most relevant, the Presidential Records Act of 1978, requires preservation of all presidential records and documents. Also, the public's opinion of government and the presidency had been severely shaken. In a Gallup poll conducted on May 4, 1973, 50% had believed that Nixon was involved in the cover-up, and 21% of people agreed that this had reduced their confidence in government a great deal. When Nixon took the presidency, there was a 60% trust in government, and when he left it, it was below 40. Watergate was a monumental event in United States history, and the repercussions are still felt today. It played a major role in turning public opinion away from the presidency and government, especially in an era where people's trust was already shaken. Since then, media has become even more watchful of government. Journalists Robert Woodward and Carl Bernstein's drive for the story uncovered a national conspiracy that otherwise may have gone unexposed. Also, David Frost's ability to obtain an apology when no one else could shows just how important the media is in today's fast-moving society. Media was crucial in the way that Watergate turned out due to both Carl Bernstein and Robert Woodward breaking open the scandal, and then David Frost's interviews, which swayed public opinion away from the presidency and affirmed that Nixon had been involved.